Okay, this next video is going to be on transporting plants, so the xylem and the phloem. So firstly, explain the xylem. It transports water and minerals. It provides structural support. It is long cylinders made of dead tissue with open ends, therefore they can form a continuous column. They contain pits made of lignin, which is deposited in spiral patterns to enable the plant to remain flexible. And water can only flow upwards. That's 5 points there. Transport water and minerals, provide structural support, long cylinders made of dead tissue with open ends, therefore they can form a long continuous column. They contain pits made of lignin, which is deposited in spiral patterns to enable the plant to remain flexible, and water can only flow upwards. Then the phloem. These are tubes made of living cells. It's involved in translocation. It consists of sieve tube elements and companion cells. Sieve tubes transport sugars, sucrose, in the dissolved form of sap. Transport can be upwards or downwards. And then companion cells are involved in ATP production for active processes such as loading sucrose into sieve tubes. And then translocation is the movement of nutrients to storage organs and growing parts of the plants, for example, source to sink. Okay, cytoplasm of sieve tube elements and companion cells link through plasmodesmata, which are gaps between cell walls. How does water move through the cell? Water enters the root hair cell by the process of osmosis and moves into the xylem tissues located in the centre of the roots. What is the purpose of root hair cells? The purpose of root hair cells is to provide a large surface area. How are minerals absorbed? Minerals are absorbed through the root hair cells by active transport. What are the two ways that water can move through the xylem? They are the symplast and the apoplast pathway, which will be described further on. What are the functions of guard cells? So number 1, potassium ions move out of the vacuole and out of the cell. Number 2, water moves out of the vacuoles following potassium ions. Number 3, the guard cell shrinks in size. Number 4, the stoma closes. And the function of guard cells is to help regulate the rate of transpiration by opening and closing the stomata. What are the adaptation to habitats? So it has xerophytes, which are adapted to dry habitats, halophytes, which are adapted to salty habitats, and hydrophytes, which are adapted to fishwater habitats. So the adaptation of xerophytes, they have thick, waxy cuticles. This stops uncontrolled evaporation through palisade cells, for example, conifer needles. There has a small leaf surface. This means there is less area for evaporation, for example, conifer needles. It has a low stomata density. The sunken stomata, the stomatal hairs and the folded leaves maintain humid air around the stomata. And the extensive roots maximize water uptake, for example, cacti. The dicotyledons, the structures. So the epidermis is a single layer of cells, often with long extensions called root hairs, which increase surface area. The cortex is a thick layer of packing cells, often containing stored starch. The endodermis, a single layer of cells that surround the vascular tissue, containing a waterproof layer called the Casparian strip, which allows the plant to control the movement of ions into the xylem. And then you have vascular tissue. This contains xylem and phloem cells, which are continuous with the stem's vascular bundles. So this is how does water enter the cell. And the first part is the symplast pathway. It's got 3 points. The first point, water enters the cytoplasm through the plasma membrane. The second point, it passes from one cell to the next through the plasmodesmata. Third point, which connects the cytoplasm of one cell to the next. Then you have the apoplast pathway, which is 8 points. Water moves from water-filled spaces, that's the first point, between cellulose molecules in cell walls, that's the second point. Water doesn't pass through any plasma membranes, third point. Therefore, it can carry dissolved minerals, fourth point. When the water reaches a part of the root called the endodermis, so when the water reaches a part of the root called the endodermis, fifth point, this is sixth point, it encounters a layer of suberin. It encounters a layer of suberin, known as the Casparian strip, which is impermeable to water. So it encounters a layer of suberin known as the Casparian strip, which is impermeable to water. One sec. What is the function of xylem tissues in a plant? It's vascular tissues that transport dissolved materials and water around the plant. It has structural support and food storage. What is the tissue made up of? Number 1, tracheids, which is long, narrow, tapered cell with pits. Number 2, vessel elements, large with thickened cell walls and no end plates when mature. Number 3, xylem parenchyma. And number 4, sclerenchyma cells, which is fiber and sclerose. Most of the xylem tissue is made up of tracheids and vessel elements, which are both types of water-conducting cells. The components of xylems and their functions. Lignified cell walls. It adds strength to withstand hydrostatic pressure, and it's impermeable to water. It has no end plates, which allows mass flow of water and solutes. It's cohesive between water molecules, adhesive between water and walls, and forces are not impeded. Then the pits in the wall, the function of the pits in the wall is lateral movement of water, allows continual flow in case of air bubbles forming in vessels, and there has no protoplasm. This means it doesn't impede mass flow of water, it's just a transpiration stream. It has small diameter vessels, which is larger than tracheids, which helps prevent the water column from breaking and assists with capillary action. Then the phloem sieve tube. What are functions of the phloem? in the plant. It helps prevent water column from breaking. No, one sec. Okay, the function of the phloem in the plant, it transports organic compounds, assimilates, which is food, particularly sucrose, from the source, for example, the leaf, to the sink, for example, the roots. The transport of these compounds can occur up and down the plant. Okay, the components of phloem and their functions. It has cellulose cell walls. This strengthens the walls to withstand the hydrostatic pressure that moves the assimilates. It has no nucleus, vacuole, or ribosomes in the mature cells. This maximizes the space for the translocation of assimilates. And it has sieve plates with sieve pores, which allows for the continuous movement of the organic compounds. It has a thin cytoplasm, which reduces frictions to facilitate the movement of assimilates. Nucleus and other organelles present, for example, rough endoplasmic reticulum. This means that it provides with metabolic support to sieve tube elements, and it helps with the loading and unloading of assimilates. It has a large number of mitochondria, so provides ATP for active transport of assimilates in and out of the cell. And plasmodesma. So, what are the differences between xylem and phloem cells? So, number one, living cells mature. Xylem has no. Are they living cells? So xylem, no, it contains hollow cells. Phloem, yes, it has companion cells. What substances are transported? In a xylem, you have water and mineral ions. Phloem, you have organic compounds / assimilates. The process of transportation for xylem is transpiration. For phloem, it's active translocation. The direction of flow in xylem is one way, in phloem is two ways. The presence of end walls. Xylem, there's no end walls. Phloem, yes, it has sieve plates. And cell wall material. In xylem, it's lignin and cellulose, and in phloem, it's just cellulose. So the graphs are the factors that affect the rate of transpiration. So light intensity, it rises and then it levels off. Air movement looks like a exponential graph. Humidity is the one that has a negative gradient. And temperature has like a, well, I don't know how to describe it, like a sine graph. Looks a bit like a sine graph. Okay, the process of transpiration. So number one, water vapor diffuses from air spaces through a stoma, lowering the water potential. Number two, water evaporates from a mesophyll cell wall into the air spaces, creating a transpiration pull. Number three, water moves through the mesophyll cell wall, which is the apoplastic pathway, or out of the mesophyll cytoplasm into the cell wall, which is the symplastic pathway. Number four, water leaves a xylem cell wall through a non-lignified area. It may travel by symplastic or apoplastic pathway. And number five, water moves up the xylem vessels, which is the transpiration stream, to replace the water lost from the leaf. And then we have the sucrose loading mechanism. So assimilates such as sucrose. Assimilates such as sucrose are transported from source to sink through phloem sieve tubes. Carbohydrates mainly transport sucrose, which is a non-reducing sugar. It's less reactive than glucose, and it's rich in energy store. Next point, symplastic or apoplastic are used for sucrose transportation, symplastic is the plasmodesmata. The apoplastic is the cell wall. If it follows the apoplastic pathway, it pumps out hydrogen ions. This is an active process, requires ATP. The concentration of hydrogen ions is more in the cell wall, which results in the hydrogen ions moving down the concentration gradient back to the cytoplasm of companion cells. The hydrogen ions move through a co-transporter protein, sucrose moves into the sieve tubes via the plasmodesmata from the companion cells. Alright, companion cells, number one, they have infoldings that increase surface area. They have many mitochondria to provide for the proton pump. This mechanism helps in the build-up of sucrose in the phloem. Then you have the unloading of assimilates. So this is an active process. It occurs at the sink. It's transported out of the companion cells and then out of the phloem tissue via apoplastic or symplastic pathways. To maintain a concentration gradient in the sink, sucrose is converted into other molecules. This is a metabolic reaction. It requires enzymes, invertase, which hydrolyzes sucrose into glucose and fructose. So it's an active process, occurs at the sink, transported out of companion cells and then out of the phloem tissue via apoplastic and symplastic pathways. To maintain a concentration gradient in the sink, sucrose is converted into other molecules. This is a metabolic reaction. It requires enzymes, invertase, which hydrolyzes sucrose into glucose and fructose.